At 0602 hours, a Russian Mi-8 helicopter lifted off from a forward operating base located in northeastern Ukraine. On board was a full squad of assault troops being transported toward Ukrainian defensive positions. Up to that moment, the flight had followed a familiar pattern. The aircraft maintained a low altitude, traced nearby roads for navigation, and deliberately avoided areas where radar coverage might detect it. What the Russian pilots did not realize, however, was that 3 Ukrainian FPV drone operators had already been waiting in the dense morning fog since 0400 hours. Their drones were modified racing quadcopters equipped with RPG warheads, turning them into improvised airborne weapons. Within the next 23 minutes, they were preparing to attempt an operation unlike anything previously carried out in the war. With assistance from Ukrainian partisan spotters positioned in the area, the 3 drone operators suddenly felt their phones vibrate at the same moment. Each device displayed a shared alert message. The operators had deliberately spread out across different vantage points to cover the 3 most likely routes the helicopter might follow. One operator monitored the M03 highway. Another kept watch over the northern agricultural roads, while the third positioned himself near the southern river valley. Missing this opportunity would mean the Russian assault troops would safely reach Ukrainian positions, making interception impossible. Fortunately for the Ukrainians, they had access to an acoustic detection network that had been quietly deployed several weeks earlier. The system relied on LoRa long-range wireless communication, a protocol capable of sending very small packets of data over distances of up to 10 kilometers while using less power than a standard LED light bulb. This made it ideal for battery-powered sensors that needed to remain concealed and operational for extended periods. Many of these sensors were cleverly disguised inside modified smartphones fitted with external microphones. They were hidden in everyday objects scattered across the landscape, inside trash bins, embedded in artificial rocks, and placed in other inconspicuous locations. Each sensor continuously listened for the deep, low-frequency sound produced by helicopter rotors. Whenever a helicopter passed overhead, each sensor recorded the precise millisecond when the sound reached its microphone. Because sound travels through air at approximately 343 meters per second, the slight differences in arrival times between sensors allowed the system to calculate the helicopter's location using triangulation. The Mi-8's twin turboshaft engines created a distinctive acoustic signature within the 20 to 40 Hz frequency range. These deep vibrations could penetrate through thick fog and forest canopy, conditions that often rendered radar and visual detection ineffective. Powered by solar-charged batteries and connected through the same LoRa network used by partisan units, the sensors could determine a helicopter's position with an accuracy of roughly 50 meters at a distance of 5 kilometers. In essence, the system functioned like Shazam for military aircraft, analyzing the sounds of the sky and identifying threats purely through their acoustic fingerprints. Soon, the first sensor detected the rhythmic beating of rotor blades, producing a distinctive spike around 35 Hz. Within seconds, 2 additional sensors confirmed the signal. Their calculated time differences allowed the network to triangulate the helicopter's location with about 50-meter precision. The Ukrainian operator positioned near the M03 highway immediately launched a small reconnaissance drone to visually confirm the target. Meanwhile, the northern operator checked the data feed from his acoustic sensor array, but saw no signs of activity along his route yet. The southern operator, stationed near the river valley, began computing potential interception angles for all 3 possible flight paths. He knew that once the helicopter's true direction became clear, the drone teams would have only seconds to respond. Inside the Mi-8 cockpit, the lead pilot glanced at his tablet. Acoustic monitoring systems were already generating a situational picture. The morning's atmospheric conditions had produced a temperature inversion, where cold air remained trapped beneath warmer air. This phenomenon bent sound waves downward toward the ground, effectively amplifying them and allowing them to travel farther than usual. As a result, the Mi-8's distinctive rotor noise could now be heard from 5 kilometers away instead of the usual 2, meaning 3 sensors had already begun triangulating its position. The helicopter was flying directly along the M03 highway at approximately 150 kilometers per hour, maintaining an altitude of 40 meters above the ground. The crew relied on visual navigation because transmitting radio signals could trigger Ukrainian anti-aircraft missiles. Meanwhile, GPS signals were unreliable, overwhelmed by heavy electronic jamming from both Russian and Ukrainian forces. The mathematics behind intercepting such a target were harsh, but not impossible. The Mi-8 would likely remain low to stay beneath radar coverage, follow roads to prevent navigation errors, and maintain a constant speed to conserve fuel. If the drone operators could accurately predict the helicopter's route and place their drones ahead of its flight path, and if numerous other variables aligned perfectly without anything going wrong, they might accomplish something unprecedented. The lead operator reached for his primary drone, while the other two operators began repositioning based on updated acoustic data. The northern operator started packing his equipment in order to move south, while the southern operator remained in place as a backup. All of them understood they probably had no more than 8 minutes to solve a tactical equation that no one had successfully solved before. Resting on the grass was the lead operator's primary drone, a Shrike 10. The machine looked like a patchwork creation, a hybrid of Chinese racing drone components combined with Soviet-era explosives. Unfortunately, the improvised system refused to cooperate. Attached to the drone was a PG-7M warhead, connected to the flight controller through a piezoelectric trigger. This device worked much like the crystal in a cigarette lighter, generating a burst of voltage upon impact that would detonate the explosive. However, during several months of storage, moisture had corroded the improvised wiring that connected the trigger to the flight system. These weapons were not manufactured by major defense contractors or produced in modern factories. Instead, they were garage-built munitions, assembled with zip ties, hand-soldered connections, and sheer determination. Every soldered joint represented a potential failure point, and every battery connection felt like a gamble with the laws of physics. While the operator worked frantically to repair the drone, the acoustic network continued to produce increasingly urgent updates. Contact bearing 285 degrees. Speed 150. Altitude 40. The message came through his earpiece from the acoustic monitoring team. Their 3 sensors continually recalculated the helicopter's location, using the Doppler shift produced by the sound of the rotors. The Mi-8 had left the M03 highway and moved onto a secondary dirt road, still traveling northwest at about 150 kilometers per hour. It was now only 7 kilometers from Ukrainian forward positions. This was not the route they had expected. The helicopter was supposed to continue straight along the M03, but something had clearly made the pilot change course and take the less direct path. Meanwhile, the morning fog that had previously appeared in scattered patches was beginning to merge into a thick wall rolling off the Dnipro River, swallowing everything below 60 meters in altitude. Within 2 minutes, the helicopter would disappear from every sensor except those detecting sound. Sound alone, however, would not provide the level of accuracy needed to carry out an interception. The second operator, who had been monitoring the northern route, had already begun repositioning his drone toward a newly calculated intercept point when suddenly his controller lost connection. The cold had completely drained the battery in his remote. Swearing under his breath, he quickly replaced it with a backup battery pack that he had wrapped in hand warmers, while the helicopter gained yet another kilometer of distance. The backup drone was the opposite of the primary system. Its battery life was worse and its range was shorter, but most importantly, it still worked. The 3S LiPo battery would probably provide around 8 minutes of flight in the cold air, which his phone showed was already at 6 degrees Celsius. The video transmitter delivered only 1 watt of power compared to the primary drone's 2 watts, meaning the signal would begin to break up once it reached about 5 kilometers. But Ukrainian engineers had a simple philosophy. If something looks stupid but works, then it isn't stupid. He secured the loose connection with a drop of superglue that might melt once the motors heated up, but could hopefully hold together long enough. Then he switched control to the backup drone as the precious seconds continued slipping away. The third operator was already in the air, racing toward a predicted interception point, when suddenly his video feed dissolved into gray static. At 6:18, the fog swallowed his drone completely. He was now flying blind. Without instruments designed for such a situation, he relied only on a compass heading and mental calculations to maintain his course, while the fog created a near-total whiteout. Water droplets do more than block visible light. They scatter infrared wavelengths and even bend sound waves, forming acoustic shadows where noise curves around pockets of moisture. For 90 seconds that felt like hours, his drone flew through what looked like a thick soup of milk while he stared at screens filled with nothing but electronic snow. Acoustic has him bearing 290, turning further west, a voice in his earpiece reported, guiding his blind navigation. Still, physics doesn't lie when you understand its limits. The helicopter couldn't climb above the fog without entering radar coverage. It also couldn't stray far from a road without risking collision with power lines that weren't marked on any Russian map. The acoustic team now provided continuous updates. Target speed steady. Altitude 40 meters. Following secondary road. They had him exactly where they wanted. The lead operator launched his backup drone directly into the fog, flying purely on calculation toward the point where geometry predicted the helicopter must appear. His battery read 75%, but it was dropping faster than expected. Cold air increases the internal resistance of LiPo batteries. Behind him, the Russian Borisogledsk 2 electronic warfare system had detected the drone launch. Its operators began actively scanning the spectrum, attempting to identify the control frequency. But the Express LRS system, an open-source drone control technology, rapidly jumped across frequencies up to 500 times per second, making it extremely difficult to jam. By the time someone located the signal, it had already shifted to a completely different channel. At 6:21 hours, the Mi-8 burst out of the fog, exactly where the Ukrainian team had predicted. It continued along the dirt road like a train moving along invisible rails. The spotter drone confirmed visual contact, but celebration immediately turned into calculation when the lead operator checked his battery level. 60% remaining. 3 kilometers left to cover. His drone's top speed was 100 kilometers per hour, while the helicopter cruised at 150 kilometers per hour. Chasing it was impossible. But interception, predicting where it would be and arriving there first, that was pure mathematics.